Austin, Texas, March 15, 2022. The morning sun cast long shadows across the playground of Riverside Elementary School as children's laughter filled the crisp Texas air. It was a Tuesday like any other in this quiet suburb of Austin, where families felt safe letting their children walk to school and play freely during recess. By 2:30 p.m. that afternoon, this sense of security would be shattered forever. 6-year-old Sophia Mitchell had always been described by her teachers as a bright, curious child with an infectious smile. Her blonde hair was typically pulled back in pigtails, and she wore her favorite purple backpack everywhere she went. On this particular morning, her mother Amanda had dropped her off at school as usual, watching through the car window as Sophia skipped toward the entrance, her small hand waving goodbye. Amanda Mitchell, a 34-year-old marketing coordinator, had established a routine that worked perfectly for their family. After dropping Sophia at school, she would head to her office downtown, confident that her daughter was safe in the care of experienced teachers and staff. Her husband Michael, a sales representative for a local technology company, was preparing for an important client presentation that would keep him in meetings for most of the afternoon. The school day proceeded normally until 1:45 p.m., when the third-grade classes were released for their afternoon recess period. Security cameras positioned around the playground captured Sophia walking outside with her classmates, her purple backpack secured on her shoulders. The footage shows her moving toward the swing set area, where she often spent her free time. Jennifer Thompson, Sophia's homeroom teacher, was supervising the playground along with 2 other faculty members. With over 15 years of teaching experience, Jennifer was known for her attentiveness and dedication to her students' safety. The playground was enclosed by a 6-foot fence with only 2 access points, both of which required keycard entry to open from the outside. At 2:15 p.m., the security cameras captured their last clear image of Sophia. She appeared to be playing alone near the swings, her small figure easily identifiable by her distinctive purple backpack. What happened in the following 15 minutes would become the subject of intense investigation and speculation. When the recess bell rang at 2:30 p.m., teachers began gathering students to return to their classrooms. It was during this routine headcount that Jennifer Thompson first noticed Sophia was missing. Initial searches of the playground and immediate school grounds yielded no trace of the 6-year-old girl. The school's emergency protocols were immediately activated. Principal Margaret Davis contacted the Austin Police Department while staff members conducted a thorough search of every classroom, bathroom, and storage area within the building. The playground was secured as a potential crime scene, and all exits were monitored to prevent anyone from leaving the premises. At 2:47 p.m., Amanda Mitchell received the phone call that would change her life forever. Principal Davis informed her that Sophia was missing and that police were already en route to the school. The words seemed impossible to comprehend. How could a child simply vanish from a secure playground in broad daylight? Michael Mitchell was pulled from his client presentation when Amanda called him in hysterics. He immediately left his meeting and raced toward the school, his mind struggling to process the unthinkable reality that his daughter had disappeared. By 3:15 p.m., Detective James Rodriguez of the Austin Police Department had arrived at Riverside Elementary. A veteran investigator with 12 years of experience in missing persons cases, Rodriguez immediately recognized the urgency of the situation. Statistics showed that the first few hours were critical in child abduction cases, and every minute that passed reduced the chances of a positive outcome. The initial investigation revealed several puzzling elements. The playground security system showed no evidence of anyone entering or leaving through the 2 access points during the recess period. The cameras had captured every teacher and staff member present, and all were accounted for during the time Sophia disappeared. More troubling was the complete absence of any struggle or disturbance in the area where Sophia was last seen. Her purple backpack was found abandoned near the swing set, but there were no signs of a physical altercation or forced removal. It was as if the 6-year-old had simply walked away and vanished into thin air. As the afternoon progressed, additional law enforcement personnel arrived at the scene. The school was evacuated, and students were interviewed individually about anything unusual they might have observed. Parents gathered anxiously outside the building, many clutching their own children closer as the reality of what had happened began to sink in. The The search expanded beyond the school grounds as investigators combed through nearby neighborhoods, parks, and wooded areas. Helicopters circled overhead while K-9 units tracked Sophia's scent to the edge of the playground fence before losing the trail completely. Local businesses were asked to review their security footage for any signs of suspicious activity or unfamiliar vehicles in the area. Amanda and Michael Mitchell found themselves thrust into every parent's worst nightmare. As evening approached with no sign of their daughter, they were forced to confront the possibility that Sophia had been taken by someone with unknown intentions. The couple provided investigators with detailed information about their family life, recent activities, and anyone who might have had contact with their daughter. The Austin Police Department issued an Amber Alert at 6:30 p.m., broadcasting Sophia's description across Texas and neighboring states. Her photograph appeared on television screens, highway signs, and social media platforms as thousands of people joined the search effort. The image showed a smiling 6-year-old with bright blue eyes and blonde pigtails, wearing the purple t-shirt and jeans she had on when she disappeared. As night fell over Austin, the search teams continued their work under artificial lighting. The Mitchell family home became a command center where investigators worked around the clock, analyzing evidence and coordinating search efforts. Amanda and Michael remained awake throughout the night, hoping for any news about their daughter's whereabouts. The case presented several immediate challenges for investigators. There were no witnesses to Sophia's actual disappearance, no clear suspects, and no obvious motive for her abduction. The security footage raised more questions than it answered, showing a child who simply vanished during a 15-minute window when dozens of people were present in the immediate area. Detective Rodriguez recognized that this case would require a methodical approach, examining every possible scenario while maintaining hope that Sophia would be found alive and unharmed. The investigation would need to explore potential family connections, school personnel, and random abduction possibilities simultaneously. As the first 24 hours passed without any trace of Sophia Mitchell, investigators began to realize they were dealing with something far more complex than a typical missing child case. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance suggested careful planning and execution, indicating that whoever was responsible had intimate knowledge of the school's layout and security procedures. The question that haunted everyone involved was simple, yet terrifying. How does a 6-year-old girl disappear from a secure playground in broad daylight without leaving a single trace? The answer to this question would prove to be more disturbing than anyone could have imagined, setting the stage for an investigation that would consume the next 2 years and ultimately reveal a truth that would shock the entire community. Austin, Texas, March 16th to September 2022. The morning after Sophia Mitchell's disappearance brought an overwhelming response from law enforcement agencies across Texas. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team arrived in Austin within hours, transforming the investigation from a local missing person case into a federal priority. Special Agent Sarah Collins, a specialist in child trafficking and abduction cases, joined Detective Rodriguez in leading what would become one of the most complex investigations in Austin's recent history. The initial 48 hours proved crucial in establishing the scope of the investigation. Forensic teams processed every inch of the playground where Sophia was last seen, collecting trace evidence that might provide clues about her disappearance. Despite their meticulous work, investigators found no physical evidence suggesting a struggle or forced abduction had taken place near the swing set. The security footage became the focal point of early investigative efforts. Digital enhancement specialists worked around the clock to analyze every frame captured by the school's camera system. The footage revealed a troubling gap in coverage, a blind spot near the playground's eastern fence where the camera's fields of view did not overlap. This discovery immediately raised questions about whether the location of Sophia's disappearance was chosen deliberately by someone familiar with the security system's limitations. As investigators delved deeper into the school's personnel records, several concerning patterns began to emerge. Jennifer Thompson, Sophia's homeroom teacher, had been present during the recess period, but her movements during the critical 15-minute window were difficult to track. When questioned about her specific activities during that time, Thompson provided vague and sometimes contradictory responses that raised red flags for the investigative team. Thompson's employment history revealed she had worked at 3 different schools over the past decade, with each transition occurring under circumstances that were not entirely clear from the available records. More troubling was the discovery that Thompson had failed to disclose a previous psychological evaluation that had been required following an incident at her former workplace, where concerns had been raised about her attachment to certain students. The investigation expanded to include a comprehensive review of all school personnel, contractors, and volunteers who had access to the building. Background checks revealed that 2 maintenance workers had minor criminal records, but both had solid alibis for the time of Sophia's disappearance. A substitute teacher who had been working in the building that day was found to have provided false information on his employment application. But investigation revealed this was related to immigration status rather than criminal intent. Meanwhile, surveillance footage from businesses and traffic cameras throughout Austin was systematically reviewed for any signs of suspicious activity on March 15th. This massive undertaking involved hundreds of hours of video from dozens of locations, each requiring careful analysis by trained investigators. The work was tedious and time-consuming, but essential for establishing a timeline of events and identifying potential suspects. 3 weeks into the investigation, a significant development occurred when security cameras from a convenience store 2 miles from Riverside Elementary captured images of a dark-colored sedan circling the area on multiple occasions during the week preceding Sophia's disappearance. The vehicle's license plate was partially obscured, but digital enhancement techniques allowed investigators to determine it was registered to a rental car company. The rental car records led investigators to a name that initially appeared promising: David Chen, a businessman from Houston who had rented the vehicle for a week-long stay in Austin. However, when investigators tracked down Chen, they discovered he had a verifiable alibi for the entire period in question and had been attending a medical conference with hundreds of witnesses. The rental car had been returned to the company the day before Sophia's disappearance, with no apparent connection to the case. This development highlighted one of the most frustrating aspects of the investigation. Every potential lead seemed to evaporate under scrutiny, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. The case was generating hundreds of tips from concerned citizens, but each one required thorough investigation, stretching the resources of the investigative team to their limits. As summer approached, the focus of the investigation shifted to the Mitchell family themselves. While this was standard procedure in missing child cases, it proved emotionally devastating for Amanda and Michael, who were already struggling to cope with their daughter's absence. Financial records, phone logs, and personal relationships were all subjected to intense scrutiny as investigators worked to rule out any family involvement in Sophia's disappearance. The financial investigation revealed that the Mitchell family was in stable condition with no significant debts or unusual transactions that might suggest a ransom situation or financial motivation for Sophia's disappearance. Their marriage appeared stable, with no history of domestic violence or child welfare concerns. Friends and neighbors consistently described them as devoted parents who were completely dedicated to their daughter's well-being. However, the investigation did uncover some troubling information about Michael Mitchell's work situation. He had been under significant pressure at his job due to declining sales figures and had been facing possible termination in the months leading up to Sophia's disappearance. While this created financial stress for the family, investigators found no evidence suggesting it was connected to their daughter's abduction. More concerning was the discovery that Amanda Mitchell had been seeing a therapist for anxiety and depression issues that had developed following a miscarriage 2 years earlier. Her medical records revealed she had been prescribed anti-anxiety medication and had missed several workdays due to emotional difficulties. While these issues were understandable and not uncommon, they raised questions about the family's stability in the months before Sophia disappeared. The investigation took an unexpected turn in July when a witness came forward with information about suspicious activity at Riverside Elementary in the weeks before Sophia's disappearance. Margaret Davis, a neighbor who lived across from the school, reported seeing someone on the playground after hours on multiple occasions during February and early March. The figure appeared to be studying the layout and security cameras, behavior that was consistent with advanced planning for an abduction. Davis's account was particularly valuable because she was a retired security guard with training in surveillance detection. Her description of the suspicious individual was detailed and specific. A person of medium height wearing dark clothing who appeared to be taking photographs or making notes while observing the playground. Most significantly, Davis reported that this activity had stopped abruptly about a week before Sophia's disappearance. When shown photographs of school personnel, Davis was unable to make a positive identification, but noted that the person's build and movement patterns were similar to someone she had seen at the school during legitimate daytime activities. This observation suggested the individual might be connected to the school in some capacity, either as an employee or regular visitor. The investigation also revealed concerning gaps in the school's security protocols. While Riverside Elementary had installed cameras and access control systems, there were significant vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone with insider knowledge. The most troubling discovery was that several staff members had been sharing access codes and propping open secure doors as a matter of convenience, creating opportunities for unauthorized entry. Furthermore, the school's visitor management system was poorly enforced, with many contractors and delivery personnel gaining access to the building without proper documentation or supervision. This lax security culture had developed over years of peaceful operation in what was considered a safe neighborhood, but it created numerous opportunities for someone with malicious intent to study the facility and plan an abduction. As September arrived and the 6-month mark of Sophia's disappearance approached, investigators faced a grim reality. Despite thousands of hours of work, hundreds of interviews, and the analysis of massive amounts of evidence, they were no closer to finding Sophia or identifying her abductor. The case had consumed enormous resources and generated intense media attention, but the investigation seemed to have reached a dead end. The psychological toll on the Mitchell family was becoming increasingly apparent. Amanda had been forced to take extended leave from her job and was requiring stronger medication to cope with her anxiety and depression. Michael was struggling to maintain his work performance and had become withdrawn from friends and family members. Their marriage was showing signs of strain as they dealt with grief, guilt, and the constant presence of investigators in their lives. Most troubling of all was the growing realization among investigators that they might be dealing with someone who had successfully executed a carefully planned abduction and had the knowledge and resources to avoid detection. The lack of physical evidence, witnesses, or credible suspects suggested a level of sophistication that was rare in child abduction cases and made the investigation exponentially more difficult. As autumn settled over Austin, Detective Rodriguez and Agent Collins knew they would need to reassess their approach to the case. The traditional investigative methods had yielded important information, but had failed to produce the breakthrough they desperately needed. The question facing the investigative team was whether they were missing something obvious or whether they were dealing with an adversary who was simply better at hiding his tracks than they were at finding them. The answer to this question would soon emerge from an unexpected source, revealing that the truth about Sophia Mitchell's disappearance was hidden in plain sight, protected by someone the investigators had trusted from the very beginning. Austin, Texas, September 2022 to March 2023. As the first anniversary of Sophia Mitchell's disappearance approached, the investigation entered a new phase marked by both desperation and methodical persistence. Detective Rodriguez and Agent Collins had exhausted most conventional leads, but a series of seemingly unrelated discoveries was about to reshape their understanding of the case entirely. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Charles Wilson, the pastor of Grace Community Church, located 3 miles from Riverside Elementary School. Wilson contacted authorities in late September with information that would prove both tantalizing and deeply troubling. He reported that approximately 2 weeks before Sophia's disappearance, he had observed a young girl matching her description at his church during a Wednesday evening service. Wilson's account was particularly noteworthy because the child had been accompanied by a woman he did not recognize from his regular congregation. The pastor described the woman as appearing nervous and distracted throughout the service, constantly checking her watch and phone. Most significantly, the woman had asked specific questions about the church's policy regarding sanctuary and protection for families in crisis situations. Church security cameras confirmed Wilson's recollection, capturing clear images of both the woman and the child on February 28, 2022. Digital analysis confirmed that the child bore a strong resemblance to Sophia Mitchell, though the image quality made positive identification challenging. The woman accompanying her was estimated to be in her late 30s with brown hair and was wearing clothing that suggested middle-class status. When investigators showed the church footage to Amanda and Michael Mitchell, their reactions were immediate and intense. While they could not definitively confirm the child was Sophia, several physical characteristics were consistent with their daughter's appearance. More disturbing was their inability to identify the woman, who appeared to be a complete stranger to the family. The church discovery prompted investigators to expand their search to include other religious institutions, community centers, and public gathering places throughout the Austin area. This expanded canvas revealed a pattern of similar sightings at 3 additional locations during the month preceding Sophia's disappearance. In each case, witnesses described a woman with a young girl who asked unusual questions about child safety and protection services. Meanwhile, the investigation into Jennifer Thompson had intensified significantly. A deeper examination of her personnel file revealed that her psychological evaluation, which she had failed to disclose during the hiring process, contained several red flags that should have disqualified her from working with children. The evaluation, conducted 3 years earlier, documented concerning behavior patterns including inappropriate attachment to students and difficulty maintaining professional boundaries. More alarming was the discovery that Thompson had been reprimanded at her previous school for taking unauthorized photographs of students during class activities. While the incident had been handled internally and had not resulted in criminal charges, it demonstrated a pattern of behavior that violated professional standards and raised serious concerns about her interactions with children. Thompson's personal life also revealed troubling elements that had not been apparent during the initial investigation. Medical records obtained through warrant showed that she had been undergoing fertility treatments for several years and had suffered multiple miscarriages. Her therapy records indicated significant emotional distress related to her inability to have children and documented what her therapist described as an unhealthy fixation on her students as substitute children. The most shocking discovery came when investigators obtained Thompson's financial records and found evidence of unusual spending patterns in the months leading up to Sophia's disappearance. Large cash withdrawals, totaling over $8,000, had been made from her savings account between January and March 2022. When questioned about these transactions, Thompson provided evasive and contradictory explanations that failed to account for the money's use. Bank surveillance footage from the withdrawals showed Thompson appearing agitated and nervous, frequently looking over her shoulder and checking her surroundings. On 2 occasions, she was observed making phone calls immediately after leaving the bank, conversations that investigators were unable to trace due to her use of prepaid cellular devices that had since been discarded. The investigation took another significant turn when digital forensics specialists completed their analysis of Thompson's personal computer and mobile devices. Hidden within deleted files, they discovered an extensive collection of photographs featuring Sophia and several other students from her class. The images had been taken surreptitiously during school activities and showed an alarming focus on Sophia in particular. More concerning was the discovery of Internet search history indicating Thompson had been researching topics related to child custody laws, international travel with minors, and methods for assuming false identities. These searches had been conducted over a 6-month period and suggested a level of premeditation that transformed the investigation from a possible crime of opportunity to a carefully planned abduction. The computer analysis also revealed that Thompson had been communicating with someone through encrypted messaging applications, but the recipient's identity remained unknown. The messages themselves had been deleted and could not be recovered, leaving investigators with only metadata showing the frequency and timing of the communications. The pattern suggested regular contact with this unknown individual throughout the period when Sophia's abduction was apparently being planned. As investigators worked to identify Thompson's mysterious contact, they discovered that her home address was registered to a property that had additional structures on the land. A rural farmhouse 20 miles outside Austin, the property included a renovated barn that had been converted into a workshop space. When investigators obtained a warrant to search the premises, they found evidence that someone had been living in the barn recently, though it appeared to have been hastily abandoned. The barn contained items that suggested it had been prepared to house a child: toys, children's clothing in Sophia's size, educational materials, and furniture appropriate for a young girl. Most disturbing was the discovery of a detailed daily schedule posted on the wall, outlining activities, mealtimes, and educational sessions that appeared designed to maintain a structured environment for a kidnapped child. Investigators also found evidence that the barn had been equipped with security measures designed to prevent escape. Windows had been boarded up from the inside, doors had additional locks installed, and there were signs that monitoring equipment had been recently removed. The preparation and thought that had gone into creating this hiding place indicated a level of planning that extended far beyond what Thompson could have accomplished alone. The discovery of the barn prompted a massive search of the surrounding area, involving multiple law enforcement agencies and volunteer search teams. Ground-penetrating radar was used to check for burial sites, while specialized search dogs trained to detect human remains combed through miles of rural terrain. Despite these extensive efforts, no trace of Sophia was found in the immediate area. As winter turned to spring in 2023, the investigation had revealed a conspiracy involving at least 2 individuals who had spent months planning Sophia's abduction. Jennifer Thompson's role as the inside accomplice was becoming clear, but the identity of her partner remained elusive. Phone records and financial transactions suggested this person was sophisticated enough to avoid leaving digital traces and had the resources to support an extended kidnapping operation. The psychological profile developed by FBI behavioral analysts painted a disturbing picture of the unknown accomplice. This individual likely had experience with children, possibly through employment in education or childcare, and demonstrated patience and planning abilities that suggested previous criminal experience. Most troubling was the assessment that this person had probably been monitoring potential victims for an extended period before selecting Sophia as their target. Amanda and Michael Mitchell found themselves caught between hope and despair as the investigation revealed more about their daughter's abduction. The discovery of the barn and evidence of planning provided confirmation that Sophia had been taken by someone with specific intentions rather than killed immediately, suggesting she might still be alive. However, the sophisticated nature of the operation and the complete disappearance of the perpetrators made her recovery seem increasingly unlikely. The strain on the Mitchell family had become overwhelming by this point. Amanda's mental health had deteriorated significantly, requiring hospitalization for severe depression and anxiety. Michael had lost his job due to extended absences and was struggling with alcohol dependency as a coping mechanism. Their marriage, once strong and supportive, was fracturing under the weight of grief, guilt, and the constant pressure of the ongoing investigation. Community support for the Mitchell family remained strong, with local businesses and organizations continuing to fund search efforts and maintain awareness of Sophia's case. However, as the months passed without significant progress, public attention began to wane, leaving the family feeling increasingly isolated in their struggle to find their daughter. As the first anniversary of Sophia's disappearance passed in March 2023, investigators faced the sobering reality that they were dealing with perpetrators who had successfully executed a complex kidnapping operation and had managed to evade detection for over a year. The evidence suggested Sophia was alive and being held somewhere, but the vast geographical area involved and the sophisticated methods employed by her captors made the search seem almost impossible. Detective Rodriguez and Agent Collins knew they needed a new approach or a significant break in the case to make progress. The traditional investigative methods had revealed important information about the conspiracy, but had failed to locate Sophia or identify her primary captor. What they couldn't have known was that the break they desperately needed would come from an entirely unexpected source, delivered through technology that would transform their understanding of where Sophia had been hidden for the past year. Austin, Texas, May 20th, 2024. 2 years and 2 months after Sophia Mitchell vanished from Riverside Elementary School, Amanda Mitchell was struggling through another sleepless night in her Austin home. The anniversary of her daughter's disappearance had passed again without resolution, leaving the family trapped in a perpetual state of anguish and uncertainty. At 3:42 a.m. on May 20th, 2024, Amanda's Apple Watch delivered a notification that would change everything. The message appeared as a simple text alert, but its content was anything but ordinary. The notification read, "Sophia is safe. Find her at the old barn on Riverside Farm." The message came from an unknown number with no identifying information, appearing in Amanda's messages as if sent from a complete stranger. Her immediate reaction was disbelief, followed by the painful recognition that this could be another cruel hoax designed to exploit her family's suffering. Amanda had received dozens of false tips and malicious messages over the past 2 years, each one requiring investigation by law enforcement and resulting in renewed hope followed by crushing disappointment. Scam artists and attention seekers had repeatedly contacted the family with fabricated information, forcing Amanda to develop a protective skepticism about any unexpected communications regarding her daughter. However, something about this particular message felt different. The specificity of mentioning a barn, combined with the reference to Riverside Farm, created an immediate connection to the investigation that had consumed the past year. Investigators had discovered evidence of planning and preparation at a converted barn, though that location had yielded no trace of Sophia when searched extensively. Amanda immediately contacted Detective Rodriguez, who had remained the lead investigator on her daughter's case, despite the passage of time and lack of progress. Rodriguez shared Amanda's initial skepticism, but recognized that any potential lead, regardless of how unlikely, required thorough investigation. The reference to Riverside Farm was particularly intriguing because it suggested knowledge of the case details that had not been released to the public. The investigation into the message began immediately, with digital forensics specialists working to trace the origin of the communication. The message had been sent through an encrypted messaging service using a prepaid phone number that had been activated specifically for this purpose. The device appeared to have been used only once before being discarded, making traditional tracking methods ineffective. More significantly, the location data associated with the message indicated it had been sent from within a 50-mile radius of Austin, suggesting the sender was in the local area rather than attempting a remote hoax. This geographical proximity added credibility to the tip and indicated that whoever sent the message had current knowledge of the situation rather than simply recycling old information from news reports. Agent Collins, who had continued working the case despite reassignment to other investigations, was called back to Austin to assist with this potential breakthrough. Her expertise in digital communications and behavioral analysis would prove crucial in evaluating the authenticity of the message and developing an appropriate response strategy. The reference to Riverside Farm created an immediate investigative challenge because property records revealed multiple locations that could match this description within the Austin metropolitan area. The most obvious candidate was the farm where Jennifer Thompson's converted barn had been discovered. But that property had been thoroughly searched multiple times without yielding any evidence of Sophia's presence. However, investigators discovered that Riverside Farm was also the historical name of a property located 30 miles northeast of Austin that had been abandoned for over a decade. The 150-acre property included a deteriorating farmhouse and several outbuildings, including a large barn that had been used for agricultural purposes before the land was abandoned following a bankruptcy proceeding. Property records showed that Riverside Farm had changed ownership several times since its abandonment, with the current legal owner being a property investment company based in Houston. The company had purchased the land for potential development, but had taken no action to improve or maintain the structures, leaving them to deteriorate in the Texas weather. More intriguingly, utility records showed that electricity had been illegally restored to one of the farm's outbuildings approximately 18 months earlier. The unauthorized connection had gone unnoticed by the utility company due to the remote location and the sophisticated method used to tap into nearby power lines. This discovery suggested that someone had been using the property for an extended period while maintaining the appearance of abandonment. The decision to investigate Riverside Farm required careful planning due to the potential danger involved. If Sophia was indeed being held at this location, any approach that alerted her captors could result in her being moved again or worse. The investigative team developed a surveillance plan that would allow them to observe the property for signs of occupancy before attempting any direct intervention. Aerial reconnaissance using unmarked aircraft revealed that while the main farmhouse appeared abandoned, the large barn showed subtle signs of recent activity. Solar panels had been installed on the roof in a configuration that would not be visible from ground level, and thermal imaging detected heat signatures consistent with human occupation of the structure. Most significantly, surveillance equipment detected movement patterns around the barn that suggested at least 2 individuals were present on the property. The movements followed regular schedules that indicated an established routine, with activity concentrated during daylight hours and minimal movement after dark. This pattern was consistent with someone attempting to maintain a low profile while caring for another person. The surveillance also revealed that access to the property was being maintained through a secondary road that connected to the main highway several miles away. This route would allow someone to come and go from the farm without passing through any populated areas or being observed by neighbors. Vehicle tracks on this road indicated regular use by at least one automobile, despite the property's officially abandoned status. As investigators prepared for a potential rescue operation, they had to consider the possibility that the message sender might be one of Sophia's captors attempting to surrender or negotiate. Behavioral analysts suggested that after 2 years of hiding, the stress and responsibility of maintaining the kidnapping might have become overwhelming for someone involved in the conspiracy. Alternatively, the message could have come from a third party who had discovered Sophia's location but was afraid to contact authorities directly. This scenario would explain the anonymous nature of the communication and the specific information provided about her whereabouts. Either possibility suggested that the situation at Riverside Farm might be reaching a critical point. The investigative team also had to prepare for the likelihood that this was an elaborate hoax designed to waste resources and inflict additional emotional damage on the Mitchell family. The sophisticated nature of the message and the accurate reference to case details suggested someone with inside knowledge of the investigation. But this could include former law enforcement personnel, legal professionals, or journalists who had covered the case extensively. As May 21st dawned, the investigative team finalized their plans for approaching Riverside Farm. The operation would involve multiple law enforcement agencies, including FBI hostage rescue specialists, local SWAT teams, and medical personnel prepared to treat a child who might have been held captive for over 2 years. Every precaution was being taken to ensure Sophia's safety while maximizing the chances of apprehending her captors. Amanda and Michael Mitchell were informed about the planned operation, but were asked to remain at home during the initial phase of the investigation. The emotional toll of false hopes had been devastating for the family, and investigators wanted to confirm Sophia's presence before involving her parents in what might be another disappointing dead end. The psychological preparation for potentially finding Sophia alive after 2 years of captivity was complex and challenging. Medical experts had briefed the rescue team about the likely physical and emotional condition of a child who had been isolated from her family and normal social interaction for such an extended period. The reunion process would need to be carefully managed to avoid additional trauma. As the tactical teams moved into position around Riverside Farm, investigators knew they were about to answer questions that had haunted them for over 2 years. Whether Sophia Mitchell was indeed being held at this remote location, and whether she was still alive and unharmed, would be determined within the next few hours. The mystery of who had sent the anonymous message and why they had waited 2 years to reveal Sophia's location remained unsolved. However, the answer to these questions seemed less important than the possibility that a 6-year-old girl who had been missing for 26 months might finally be coming home to her family. What investigators could not have anticipated was that the truth about Sophia's captivity and the identity of her captors would prove to be both more disturbing and more surprising than any scenario they had considered during their 2-year investigation. Riverside Farm, Texas, May 21, 2024. At 6:15 a.m. on May 21, 2024, tactical teams from multiple law enforcement agencies converged on the abandoned property known as Riverside Farm. The morning mist hung low over the overgrown fields as officers moved silently through the tall grass, their weapons drawn and their hearts racing with the possibility that they were about to end one of Texas's most haunting missing child cases. Detective Rodriguez led the operation from a command post established half a mile from the main barn, coordinating with FBI hostage rescue specialists and local SWAT teams who had positioned themselves around the perimeter of the target building. Thermal imaging continued to show 2 heat signatures inside the structure, confirming that the location was occupied despite its abandoned appearance. The approach to the barn required extreme caution due to the unknown mental state of whoever was inside and the potential danger to Sophia if she was indeed being held captive. Negotiation specialists were standing by in case communication became necessary, while medical personnel prepared for multiple scenarios, ranging from treating a traumatized child to dealing with potential casualties from an armed confrontation. As the tactical team moved closer to the barn, they could observe modifications that had been made to the structure over the past 2 years. The windows had been covered with what appeared to be blackout materials, while a small ventilation system had been installed to provide fresh air circulation. Most significantly, the main doors had been reinforced with additional locks and security measures that could only be operated from the inside. The solar panel installation on the roof was more extensive than aerial surveillance had initially revealed, suggesting that whoever was using the barn had invested considerable resources in making it a long-term hiding place. The electrical system appeared sophisticated enough to power lighting, heating, and possibly electronic equipment that could be used for communication or surveillance. At 6:45 a.m., the tactical team was in position to begin the final approach. Using specialized equipment designed to minimize noise, they moved to positions adjacent to the barn's entrance points while maintaining visual contact with each other through advanced communication systems. The operation required split-second timing to prevent anyone inside from harming Sophia during the rescue attempt. The first breach occurred simultaneously at 2 separate entrance points, with officers using tactical methods designed to disorient occupants while minimizing the risk of violence. The interior of the barn had been completely transformed from its original agricultural purpose into what appeared to be a carefully designed living space with separate areas for sleeping, eating, and recreational activities. The first person encountered by the tactical team was Jennifer Thompson, who immediately surrendered without resistance when confronted by armed officers. Thompson appeared to have aged significantly during the 2 years since Sophia's disappearance, showing signs of stress and exhaustion that suggested the psychological toll of maintaining her secret had been overwhelming. The second heat signature detected by thermal imaging turned out to be Sophia Mitchell herself, now 8 years old and significantly changed from the 6-year-old girl who had disappeared from Riverside Elementary School. She was found in a sleeping area that had been designed to resemble a child's bedroom, complete with toys, books, and educational materials that suggested her captors had been attempting to provide some form of structured care. Sophia's immediate reaction to the rescue team was one of confusion and fear rather than relief. After 2 years of isolation with only Jennifer Thompson for human contact, the sudden appearance of multiple armed strangers was understandably terrifying for the child. Medical personnel immediately began assessment procedures, while specially trained child psychologists worked to establish communication and provide reassurance. The physical examination revealed that Sophia appeared to be in reasonably good health despite her prolonged captivity. She showed signs of adequate nutrition and medical care, suggesting that Thompson had been attempting to maintain her well-being throughout the kidnapping period. However, the psychological impact of her isolation and separation from her family was immediately apparent in her behavior and responses to questions. Most disturbing was Sophia's apparent attachment to Jennifer Thompson and her confusion about why the woman was being taken away by police officers. The psychological phenomenon known as Stockholm Syndrome had clearly developed during their 2 years together, with Sophia viewing Thompson as a protective figure rather than her captor. This emotional bond, would complicate her recovery and reunion with her biological family. As investigators processed the scene inside the barn, they discovered extensive evidence of the planning and preparation that had gone into creating this hiding place. Educational materials suggested that Thompson had been attempting to homeschool Sophia using a curriculum that emphasized isolation from the outside world and dependence on her captor for all social and emotional needs. The living space included a sophisticated security system that would have alerted Thompson to any approach by outsiders, explaining how she had been able to avoid detection for such an extended period. Hidden cameras monitored the surrounding area, while motion sensors provided early warning of any potential threats to their concealment. More troubling was the discovery of detailed journals maintained by Thompson throughout the kidnapping period. These documents revealed the psychological deterioration of someone who had convinced herself that taking Sophia was an act of rescue rather than abduction. The entries described elaborate justifications for her actions and detailed plans for maintaining their hidden life indefinitely. The journals also revealed that Thompson had been struggling with the decision to surrender for several months before sending the anonymous message to Amanda Mitchell. The psychological pressure of maintaining the secret, combined with growing concerns about Sophia's emotional development in isolation, had gradually worn down her resolve to continue the kidnapping. Most significantly, the journals documented Thompson's growing realization that she was causing irreparable harm to Sophia, despite her intentions to provide better care than the child would receive with her biological family. The internal conflict between her maternal instincts and her recognition of the damage she was causing had ultimately led to her decision to reveal Sophia's location. The investigation of the barn also uncovered evidence that Thompson had been preparing for the possibility of discovery throughout the entire kidnapping period. Emergency supplies, escape routes, and contingency plans suggested that she had never been completely confident in her ability to maintain the deception indefinitely. Financial records found at the scene revealed how Thompson had funded the operation over 2 years. The $8,000 in cash withdrawals documented earlier in the investigation had been supplemented by income from online work that she had been performing using false identity documents. This steady income stream had allowed her to maintain the barn and provide for Sophia's needs without attracting attention from authorities. The discovery also explained the sophisticated nature of the kidnapping operation that had initially suggested multiple conspirators. Thompson had spent months researching and planning every aspect of the abduction, using online resources to learn about security systems, child psychology, and methods for avoiding detection by law enforcement agencies. As news of Sophia's discovery spread, Amanda and Michael Mitchell were immediately notified and began the journey to be reunited with their daughter. However, medical and psychological professionals cautioned that the reunion process would need to be carefully managed to avoid additional trauma for a child who had been isolated from her family for over a quarter of her young life. The initial reunion between Sophia and her parents was both joyful and heartbreaking, as the 8-year-old struggled to remember people who had been absent from her daily life for 2 years. The psychological impact of her captivity was immediately apparent in her difficulty recognizing her own parents and her continued attachment to Jennifer Thompson as her primary caregiver. Medical professionals began immediate assessment of Sophia's physical and mental condition, preparing treatment plans for what would likely be a lengthy recovery process. The trauma of kidnapping, combined with 2 years of isolation and psychological manipulation, had created complex challenges that would require specialized therapeutic intervention. Jennifer Thompson was taken into custody and transported to the Travis County Jail, where she would await formal charges related to kidnapping, child endangerment, and related offenses. Her cooperation with authorities during the arrest suggested that she was prepared to accept responsibility for her actions, though her mental state remained a concern for investigators and legal professionals. As the rescue operation concluded and evidence was processed, investigators began to understand the full scope of what had occurred at Riverside Farm. The case represented one of the most psychologically complex kidnapping situations in recent Texas history, involving not just the physical taking of a child, but an elaborate attempt to replace her family relationships with a fabricated alternative. The discovery of Sophia alive after 2 years represented a miraculous outcome that defied the statistics for missing children cases. However, the psychological damage caused by her prolonged captivity would require years of treatment and support to overcome, transforming her rescue from a simple, happy ending into the beginning of a new and equally challenging chapter in her young life. What remained to be determined was whether Jennifer Thompson would be held fully accountable for her actions, and whether the justice system could adequately address a crime that involved such complex psychological manipulation and long-term trauma to an innocent child. Austin, Texas, September 2024 to present. 4 months after Sophia Mitchell's dramatic rescue from Riverside Farm, the Travis County Courthouse became the stage for one of the most closely watched criminal proceedings in recent Texas history. On September 15, 2024, Jennifer Thompson's trial began with intense media coverage and public attention focused on understanding how a trusted teacher had orchestrated such an elaborate and psychologically devastating crime. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Patricia Evans, faced the complex challenge of presenting a case that involved not just the physical kidnapping of a child, but an intricate web of psychological manipulation and long-term planning that had devastated multiple lives. The evidence collected from Riverside Farm, combined with Thompson's own journals and the testimony of investigators, painted a disturbing picture of calculated deception and mental instability. Thompson's defense team, headed by experienced criminal attorney Robert Chen, pursued a strategy that emphasized their client's mental health issues and genuine belief that she was protecting Sophia from perceived dangers. They argued that Thompson's actions, while legally inexcusable, were the result of severe psychological illness rather than criminal malice, seeking a verdict that would emphasize treatment over punishment. The trial proceedings revealed details about Thompson's psychological state that had not been fully understood during the initial investigation. Expert testimony from psychiatrists described a complex condition involving maternal obsession disorder, delusional thinking, and severe attachment issues that had developed following her own reproductive failures and professional disappointments. Medical evidence presented during the trial documented Thompson's extensive history of mental health treatment, including multiple hospitalizations for depression and anxiety that had been carefully concealed from her employers. The defense argued that the school district's failure to properly screen Thompson's psychological background had contributed to creating the conditions that allowed the kidnapping to occur. More significantly, the trial revealed the sophisticated nature of Thompson's planning and the extent to which she had studied child psychology and kidnapping cases to develop her methods. Evidence showed that she had researched famous abduction cases, studied techniques for avoiding detection, and deliberately chosen methods designed to minimize psychological trauma to her victim while maximizing the chances of successful concealment. The prosecution presented testimony from FBI behavioral analysts who described Thompson's actions as representing one of the most methodically planned child abductions in their experience. The level of preparation, from the barn conversion to the development of false identity documents, demonstrated criminal sophistication that contradicted defense claims of mental illness as the primary motivating factor. Sophia's condition became a central focus of the trial proceedings, with medical professionals testifying about the long-term psychological impact of her 2-year captivity. Child psychologists described the complex trauma syndrome that had developed as a result of her isolation and the systematic replacement of her family relationships with dependence on her captor. The testimony revealed that Sophia's recovery was progressing slowly but steadily under intensive therapeutic treatment. She had gradually begun to reconnect with her parents and rebuild relationships that had been severed by her abduction. However, professionals cautioned that the full extent of her psychological healing would take years to achieve and might never be completely successful. Most disturbing was expert testimony about the sophisticated psychological manipulation Thompson had employed to maintain control over Sophia during their 2 years together. The journals found at Riverside Farm documented deliberate efforts to convince the child that her parents had abandoned her and that Thompson was her only source of safety and care. Amanda and Michael Mitchell provided powerful victim impact testimony describing the devastating effect of their daughter's disappearance on their family and community. Amanda's testimony detailed her descent into severe depression and the destruction of her career and social relationships, while Michael described his struggle with alcoholism and the near collapse of their marriage during Sophia's absence. The couple also testified about the ongoing challenges of rebuilding their relationship with Sophia, who continued to struggle with conflicted feelings about her captivity and rescue. Family therapy sessions were helping to address these issues, but the process was slow and emotionally exhausting for everyone involved. Community impact testimony revealed how Sophia's kidnapping had affected the broader Austin area, leading to significant changes in school security procedures and child protection protocols. Parents throughout the region had been forced to confront the reality that trusted authority figures could pose threats to their children's safety, fundamentally altering their approach to child care and education decisions. The trial also exposed systemic failures in the background check procedures used by educational institutions throughout Texas. Thompson's ability to conceal her psychological problems and previous incidents highlighted gaps in the screening process that potentially placed other children at risk from unstable or dangerous individuals. On October 22, 2024, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all major charges against Jennifer Thompson, including kidnapping, child endangerment, and multiple related offenses. The conviction carried a potential sentence of life in prison, reflecting the severity of her crimes and the long-term impact on her victim. During the sentencing phase, Thompson's defense team presented extensive mitigation evidence about her mental health history and genuine remorse for her actions. Letters from former students and colleagues described her previous dedication to education and child welfare, creating a complex portrait of someone whose life had been derailed by untreated psychological illness. However, the prosecution argued that the sophisticated planning and sustained deception involved in Sophia's kidnapping demonstrated criminal responsibility that could not be excused by mental health issues. They emphasized the need for a sentence that would both punish Thompson's actions and deter similar crimes by other individuals in positions of trust with children. On November 10, 2024, Judge William Stevens sentenced Jennifer Thompson to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. The sentence reflected both the seriousness of her crimes and recognition of the mental health factors that had contributed to her actions. Thompson would be required to undergo psychiatric treatment during her incarceration and would be evaluated for continued dangerousness before any potential release. The sentencing brought a measure of closure to the Mitchell family, though their focus had already shifted to Sophia's ongoing recovery and their efforts to rebuild their lives. The family had made the difficult decision to relocate to another state, seeking privacy and distance from the intense media attention that had surrounded their case. Sophia's progress in therapy continued to show positive signs, with gradual improvement in her ability to form appropriate attachments and trust relationships. However, her therapists cautioned that the full impact of her experience might not be apparent until she reached adolescence and adulthood, requiring ongoing support and monitoring throughout her development. The case prompted significant legislative action in Texas, with new laws requiring enhanced background checks for school personnel and improved reporting procedures for suspicious behavior involving children. The Sophia Mitchell Act, passed in early 2025, mandated psychological evaluations for all educational professionals and created new training requirements for recognizing signs of mental instability in school employees. Educational institutions throughout the state implemented new security protocols designed to prevent similar incidents, including enhanced surveillance systems, stricter visitor controls, and improved communication procedures for monitoring student safety. While these measures could not guarantee complete protection, they represented significant improvements in institutional child protection efforts. The broader impact of Sophia's case extended beyond legislative and policy changes to influence public awareness about the psychological complexity of child abduction cases. Mental health professionals used the case to educate parents and educators about recognizing signs of unhealthy attachment behaviors and the importance of early intervention for individuals showing concerning patterns of interaction with children. As 2025 began, Sophia Mitchell, now 9 years old, continued her recovery process while slowly rebuilding her relationship with her parents and adjusting to life in their new home state. Her case had transformed from a nightmare of loss and uncertainty into a complex story of survival, justice, and the long journey toward psychological healing. The investigation that had consumed 2 years and involved hundreds of law enforcement professionals had ultimately succeeded in bringing Sophia home and holding her captor accountable for her crimes. However, the true measure of success would be determined by Sophia's ability to overcome her trauma and build a healthy, productive life despite the profound challenges she had faced during her formative years. Jennifer Thompson's conviction and imprisonment marked the end of the criminal justice process, but it represented only the beginning of a much longer journey toward understanding how such crimes can be prevented and how their victims can be helped to heal. The legacy of Sophia Mitchell's case would continue to influence child protection efforts and trauma treatment for years to come, ensuring that her suffering would contribute to protecting other children from similar fates.